Well, welcome back to our course on systems design as we're looking at system analysis and design for mostly focused on an information system type of development as envisioned by Dennis, Wixom, and Roth. And we're now into the third phase, the design phase. We've talked about moving into design, in architecture design, and now in this lecture, we're going to be talking about user interface design. And so some interesting concepts that we'll get a chance to be thinking about. Ultimately, you want to make things available to users when we're having an information system. So a user interface is a part of the system which the users interact with. It includes a screen display that provides navigation to the system, the screens and the forms that capture data, and the reports that the system produces. So in this chapter, in this lecture, we'll introduce the basic principles and processes of interface design and discuss how to design the interface to achieve a high usability interface. In terms of the objectives, we'll explain the concept of usability regarding the user interface. We'll describe several fundamental user interface design principles. We'll explain the process of the user interface design. We'll then look into ways to understand the perspectives of the users of the unit of the user interface, and there's various types. We'll describe ways to define the structure of the user interface. We'll explore the standards that should be established for the user interface, describe various ways to prototype the user interface, discuss ways to evaluate and test the user interface, and also discuss special concerns associated with the touchscreen-enabled user interface as we want to be available for tablet and cell phone interfaces. Plus, we'll also be able to design a highly usable interface. That's the goal by the time we're done with this. So in terms of an introduction, the system interface, the quote connections with other systems where systems exchange information with each other. This is, we want to be designing as a part of a program design, the user interface, quote, connections with the users. And that's the focus of this chapter. So this is how we can try and make a seamless interface between the customer and the information system and make it a rewarding experience with the user. The navigation mechanism provides a way for the users to tell the system what to do. The input mechanism defines the way the system captures the information, and the output mechanism defines the way the system provides information to users or other systems. We'll get into the graphical user interface, or GUI, which is the most common type of interface in use today. What about the usability concept? The system is easy to use and easy to learn. Tasks are completed more efficiently and with more accuracy. Mistakes with systems are reduced. The user satisfaction with the new system is increased, and the adoption of the system is more likely. So thus, this is what we can see in terms of making it usable, user-friendly, things like that. So what are the principles for user interface design? We want to consider the layout, the content awareness, aesthetics, the usage level, consistency, and the minimum use of effort. And so we're going to get into each one of these for a while here in this lecture. So in terms of the layout, the interface should be a series of areas on the screen that are used consistently for different purposes. For example, a top area for commands and navigation, middle area for information to be input or output, and a bottom area for status information. Content awareness, the user should always be aware of where they are in the system and what information is being displayed. For aesthetics, the interface should be functional and inviting to users through careful use of white space, colors, and fonts, etc. In terms of the usage level, although ease of use and ease of learning often lead to similar design decisions. There is sometimes a trade-off between the two, and we want to be thinking about that. For consistency, you want consistency in the interface design. This enables users to predict what will happen before they perform a function. And finally, you want to minimize user effort. The interface should be simple to use. Most designers plan on having no more than 3 mouse clicks from the starting menu until the user performs the desired effort that they want with their work. Okay, we'll get into these in more detail. First of all, the layout. The screen is often divided into 3 parts: the navigation area, which is the top, status, which is the bottom, and work area is in the middle. The information can be presented in multiple areas, like areas should be grouped together. With more concepts here, areas and information should minimize user movement from one to another. Ideally, areas will remain consistent in size, shape, placement, and reports presenting retrieved data. So here gives you an idea of a layout for a modern web page. Note the use of multiple layout areas for site navigation. As the user navigates to each part of the site, the overall page layout is the same. This use of multiple layout areas also applies to input and outputs. Well, what about content awareness? All interfaces should have titles. Menus should show where you are, where you came from to get there, and it should be clear what information is within each area. Fields and fields labels should be selected carefully, and you want to use dates and version numbers to aid the system users. So another thing in terms of content awareness, note that the use of highlights to indicate menu selection, and you could be providing breadcrumbs that provide additional clues on navigation panels. And so here we're going from clients, flight requests to edit requests. And so we see the client then starts to, one of the options that shows up below that would be flight request, and then a menu below that shows up and we select the edit request. In terms of aesthetics, interfaces need to be functional and inviting to use. You want to avoid squeezing too much information, especially for novice users. You want to design the text carefully, be aware of font and size, and avoid using all capital letters. Colors and patterns should be used carefully, and use colors to separate or categorize items. In terms of usage level, some people will be frequent, heavy users of the system. Others will be less frequent. But for the heavy users, they have frequent users desire ease of use, quick and easy completion of tasks. For systems primarily used by frequent users include ways to perform tasks directly, whether it be hotkeys, shortcuts, etc. For infrequent users, ease of learning is the key, and we want to have quick and easy ways to figure out what to do. For systems primarily used by infrequent users, you want to include careful menu design, tooltips, and extensive help systems. User interface design should anticipate the type of users expected. And for systems with both user types, you want to incorporate both user preference and design as much as possible. What about consistency? Elements are the same throughout the application. You go into a new subpage, it should have the same look and feel as the other. You want to have it such that it enables user to predict what will happen. It reduces the learning curve. It considers elements within an application or across application, and it pertains to many different levels. The navigation controls, terminology, report, and form design. Here are examples of inconsistent elements. These buttons all came from the same application. Note the different button styles, colors, and font size. This is definitely something that you'd want to avoid. Inconsistency is likely to cause uncertainty and confusion. In terms of minimizing the user effort, the interfaces should be designed to minimize the amount of effort needed to accomplish task. And thus we have the 3-click rule. The user should be able to go from the start or main menu of a system to the information or action they want in no more than 3 mouse clicks or 3 keystrokes. In terms of the special issues that's associated with touchscreen design, and this is beginning to be more common with tablets and cell phones, but even some laptops have touch screens as well. So it's ideal for information display, but not for data entry. You want to place the content at the top and navigation controls at the bottom, so fingers do not obscure content areas. You want to place labels on top of navigation controls. You want to size objects correctly for, quote, fat fingers. You want to include adequate space in between objects. Consider needs of left-handed and right-handed users as well. Use of bright colors and backgrounds can help reduce glare and hide fingerprints. You want to consider using each device's standardization gestures interactions to enhance a user's ease of learning and ease of use. Okay, we'll have several charts here based on Android device gestures. We could have had something for iOS gestures as well, but just for an example, we'll just use Android as for our illustration. So we have the various gestures: tap, scroll and pan, drag, swipe, and pinch. And so once you're familiar with one type of Android device, for this example, you could go to another one. So you're trying to make it have the same look and feel that would be familiar with them. Similarly, but we're not showing it, would be for iOS. You have the double tap or pinch, compound gesture, pick up and move. And I'm not going to be going through these, but just you can go to the textbook or pause the video and think about this in more details. And here we have the tap or long press, and finally the swipe. So we have quite a number of gestures that are common, and so we would want to be utilizing those in the way we design the GUI. So what is a user interface design process? You want to understand the users. You want to organize the interface, define the standards that will be incorporated, define prototypes, and then do evaluation and testing. And this is just an illustration trying to help us to get that perspective. Ultimately, you really want to get a chance to understand the users, what are their needs. Users likely will have different goals and intentions when using the system. Use personas to develop characterizations of the various user groups, their interests, typical behaviors, goals and objectives, and expectations. Plan a user interface that will be satisfying for that particular user group. You can use scenario outlines that show the steps users perform to accomplish their work. It also can be presented in a simple narrative tied to a related DFD. You want to document the most common pass through the use case, so interface designs will be easy to use for those situations. In terms of organizing the interface, you want to define the basic components of the interface and how they will work together to provide functionality to users. We can use the interface structural diagram. It shows how all screens, forms, and reports are related, shows how the user moves from one to another. Like DFD and using boxes and lines, boxes denote screens and lines show movement from one to another. It's going to be different from DFDs in having no standard rules or format. And for websites, you can use a sitemap, show how all the information on the site fits together and help establish the hierarchy of information on the site. In terms of definitions, you want to define the standards, clarify the decisions on all key interface elements to ensure consistency. You want to have basic common elements across individual screens, forms, and reports within the interface. You want to be thinking about the interface metaphor, calendar, checkbook, shopping cart, etc. You want to think of the interface objects, for example, the customer, or client, employee, or associate. You want to think about the interface actions of buying or purchasing, checkout, exiting, things like that. You want to think of the interface icons or pictures that represent status or action. And you want to be thinking of the interface templates, the layout guides for all screens. Okay, having some kind of a prototype is a good way to start to figure out if you're on track. And so you can have a mock-up or a simulation of screens, forms, and reports. Common methods include just having paper sketches. You can have wireframe diagrams. You can do storyboarding. You can have wire flow diagrams, HTML prototype, or language prototype. Here's an example of what a wireframe would look like. And so you're starting to organize where you're going to be putting information in the screen. You can also be thinking about a storyboard and how a user is going to engage with various bits of information. And this is going to help you with a logical flow. You can also think of a language prototype. And so what language are you going to be using? What elements that would be associated that's going to be helping you to effectively get a GUI set up. In terms of interface evaluation and testing, you can do heuristic evaluation. You can compare the design to a checklist. You can do a walkthrough evaluation where the team simulates movement through components. You can do interactive evaluation where users try out the system. And finally, you can have formal usability testing, and that tends to be expensive and detailed use of special lab testing to perform development and assessment that way. What about navigation design? You can assume the users that they have not read the manual, have not attended training, and do not have external help readily at hand. So you're going to be trying to design navigation so that they can figure it out. All controls should be clear and understandable and placed in an intuitive location on the screen. You want to prevent mistakes, that is by limiting choices, never display commands that cannot be used, or gray them out when they're in a certain mode, and confirm actions that are difficult or impossible to undo. You want to simplify recovery from mistakes and use consistent grammar order. For menu tips, the menus enable users to select actions from an organized display of actions, categories, and options. Broad and shallow design is preferred. Logical categories can be objects or actions, and common menu formats include menu bars, drop-down menus, pop-up menus, tab menus, icon toolbars, and image maps. Menus may become less popular with trend towards such touchscreens. So here's just an example of some types of menus. And so you have the top menu bar that you can have here. You can pull things down and gradually work your way to where you would like to be. So those are some possible things that you can do, and you can see the layout of the different parts of your GUI. Sometimes this is reconfigurable, and so you can choose where you're going to have different bits of information to help you in your work. So here are some elements in the menu: the menu bar, drop-down menu, hyperlink menu, embedded hyperlinks, pop-up menu, and a tab menu. You can be reading through all of these. I'm just going to mention the names. And so either see the textbooks or pause the video to look at this a little bit longer. You can also have the toolbar and also have an image map. And so those are all things that you can be thinking about for the types of menu that you may want to be utilizing. In terms of message tips, common messages include error messages, confirmation messages, acknowledgement message, delay message, and help message. You want to strive for clear, concise, and complete messages. It should be grammatically correct and free of jargon and abbreviations, unless, of course, that's familiar to the users, but you have to make sure that that's valid. And you want to avoid negatives and humor, and so keeping it at a higher level professionalism. What are some of the types of messages? You have error messages, confirmation messages, acknowledgement messages, delay messages, and help messages. So you want to make sure that you can be including all of those depending on the nature of the application and the various things that you need to have the GUI accomplish. All right, well, let's now think about input design. The goal is to simply and easily capture accurate information for the system. You want to reflect the nature of the inputs and find ways to simplify their collection. So you can use online and batch processing appropriately. For online processing, it immediately records the transaction in the appropriate database. For batch processing, it collects inputs over time, holds them temporarily, and then processes all the transactions at one time in the batch. Batch processing simplifies data communication and other processes, but the master files are not always updated in real time, and so that's something that needs to be thought about. What about capturing data at the source? You want to do this to reduce duplication of work, reduce processing time, decrease costs, and decrease probability of error. In terms of source data automation, using barcode readers and scanners can help. Optical character recognition, OCR, is a good thing. Magnetic stripe readers, smart cars, and RFIDs, radio frequency ID tags, are also some things that you can help to get the source data that's going to be utilized into the system rather than having to type it all in manually. You want to try and minimize keystrokes. Keyboard entry is slow and error prone. Never ask the key enter information that can be obtained other ways, whether it be lookups, drop down list, default values, and things like that. So here it gives you some ideas of some user input options. And so you have things that you can select, various ways of doing this. And so it's easier for you to just get the right fields from a selection rather than type it in, and then you're done. What are types of selection control? You can have checkbox selection list, a radio button selection list, an on-screen selection list, drop-down selection list, combo box selection list, and up-down numeric control. And we saw a lot of those here in this pictorial here to help us get an idea of what they would look like. What about input validation? You want to apply a judicious amount of input validation to ensure accuracy. Types include completeness check, format check, range check, check digits check, consistency check, and database checks. You've probably had experiences with GUIs that they check you. They want to have the data in a certain type of format, so they don't let you move on unless you provide that format. And those are some examples of how you have had a chance to see the input validation. So types of input validation, completeness check. You can just read through this. I'm just going to read the list here again. Format check, range check, check digit check, consistency check, and database checks. All of these things are important that we want to make sure that we have taken care of. Okay, now let's look at the output design. You want to understand the report usage. Does a reference or cover to cover frequency, long time or batch reports? And so what is the nature of how and when it's going to be, this report is going to be used? You want the information load, all the needed information and no more, give them the facts. You want to minimize bias. You want to utilize various report types, detailed, summary, exception, graphical, things like that, and media to satisfy the user's output requirements. So here's a type of reports. You can read the details here. I won't go through that. A little bit more thoughts on detailed reports, summary report, turnaround document, and graphs. So that's a quick synopsis of trying to think of user design. And so here is a chapter review. We identified and described the 5 basic rules of user interface design. We described the concept of usability with respect to a system's user interface. Why is this concept important to the interface design? You want to make sure you explore that question. We explained 3 unique aspects of design for touchscreen user interface. We discussed the 5 components of the user interface design process. We explained the unique issues associated with design of the system's navigation mechanism. We discussed ways to improve the quality of input data captured by the system. And finally, we explained the best ways to produce output from the system. Okay, we have a lot of different terms that we used. So this straddles over 4 slides, and I won't go over these in detail, but maybe just cherry pick a few things. All these different ways that we would have this information provided for the user. Um, so here we see a lot of examples. So we basically are trying to make this GUI as beneficial as possible. We're trying to think about the interface design, make it do its job in a pleasing and useful way. RFID tags. So I think probably this is something that people have either experienced or, and if not, this is something that it's a good idea to become aware of. And here is the last chart that I'll show, finishing up with the key terms. And so ultimately, we want to have a really wonderful user experience and make it so that most anybody can come and use this information system through the GUI interface and have a successful experience. All right, thank you very much. That's it for this lecture.